Good morning, directors. Hope y'all are doing well. We'll go ahead and get started. Before I jump into my little opening, I did want to mention that we're doing things a little bit different for this board meeting. The board members and the public should be able to see a screen that will allow them to see the presenter. So anyone who is presenting an item this morning will be up on your screen, and they will also have their slideshow presentation if they have one right below it. So let me jump into the opening. Again, this is Kevin Pattison, GBRA General Manager. Welcome to the Board of Directors meeting of July 15th, 2020. Thank you for joining us as explained in the communication to the board by virtue of the recent extension of the governor's disaster proclamation and the continued suspension of certain provisions of the Texas Open Meetings Act. On a temporary basis, the authority is permitted to use certain alternate means to conduct meetings that are not usually permitted by the Act, including telephonic participation by the Board of Directors. I'll take a brief moment to explain the webinar features. Please note the call-in number is a listen-only line. If you would like to speak during public comment or a specific agenda item, you will have to log in from a computer or from a phone using the GoToWebinar application. We have provided the web link on our social media platforms and website. The link can be found on GBRA's homepage at gbra.org by opening the agenda document from our website. If you log in using the GoToWebinar link, we'll be able to recognize you to speak during the appropriate time. Once again, the call-in phone number is listen only. Before the chairman calls the meeting to order, our general counsel, Tom Bowl, will review the requirements of the Act relative to meeting by telephone, as well as some general procedures to help carry out the meeting in an orderly and efficient manner. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tom.
Thank you. First, I want to make sure everyone in attendance is aware that this meeting is being recorded as required by the governor's proclamation and the Open Meetings Act. A copy of the recording will be available to the public. Second, the Act requires each person clearly state their name prior to speaking, which I didn't do, so my name is Tom Bowl. Excuse me there. Please state your name before you speak and every time that you want to speak so that it's clear to everyone participating who is doing the talking. Third, to ensure clarity on the vote for all actions that require board action, I'd ask that the directors please state your name prior to making a motion or prior to seconding a motion. Once a motion has been made and seconded and after any discussion, I'll call the roll and call out the name of each director separately on the motion. When you hear your name called, please verbally respond with an aye, a nay, or an abstention. If your name is inadvertently not called for any votes, please speak up and let us know. Next, we want to make sure that we're not talking over each other. While we do not anticipate that this will be a problem, it may inadvertently occur since we don't have total benefit of all visual clues to know who wants to speak and when. If you want to speak, please raise your virtual hand to do so. GBRA's moderator will recognize you and announce to the chairman who has requested to speak. Also, in the interest of keeping the audio of this meeting as clear as possible, please mute your line whenever you're not speaking. And finally, we need to identify each person who's joining telephonically so that we can accurately reflect attendance in the minutes of the meeting. I will perform a roll call of board members followed by employees. When you hear your name called, please respond and indicate that you are present on the call. Let me start, if I may, then by doing a roll call of the board members. Director Hermes?
Here.
Director Fogel? Director Fogel?
Here.
Director Matthews?
Here.
Director Modal?
Here.
Director Metter?
Present.
Director Carbonara?
Here.
Director Ehrig?
Here.
Chairman Patillo?
Here.
All right, now I've called the roll of people that are here, confirm that they're present in the room. This is Tom Bowl. Kevin Pattison is here. Daryl Nichols, Jonathan Stinson, Alvin Scherg, Randy Stotts, David Harris, Vanessa Guerrero, Charles Hickman, Courtney Kerr-Moore, Ernie Granville. Is Tricia Ramirez here? I think she was in the offices up the hill. So Tricia's not here. Lee Crittenden is here. Cricket Dieter, Patty Gonzalez, Amanda Reichel, Ram Mendoza, and Carl Westergaard. Is there anyone else who I didn't call? Brian Perkins is here. Is that everybody? Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we're ready. We're finished with the preliminaries and ready to proceed.
All right, I will certify that a quorum's present. And Mr. Patterson, have all the notices been posted?
Yes, sir, they have.
We have a chairman item number 1, but I don't believe we have to take any action on that, do we?
No, sir, we don't. We have this as an item just in case there was any discussion, but at this point, we're planning to have the August board meeting on the original scheduled date. So we're not going to change that. And then at this point, we presume it'll be via telephone call as well. And if anything changes, we'll certainly let y'all know.
Strange times indeed. All right, this is the portion of the meeting that deals with public comments, and I think Kevin has already, Mr. Patterson has already gone over the mechanics of that. We would ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes if it's on a non-agenda item, and if it's on an agenda item, you wait for that portion of the agenda to come up. Has anyone asked to speak?
No, sir, we do not have anyone signed in to comment.
All right, that brings us to the consent items, items number 3, 4, 5, and 6, and I would entertain a motion to deal with them together unless any member of the board would like to pull one out to discuss individually.
We don't have any, well, let me pause for a second. Director Metter, do you have a comment or question?
I was going to move that we approve those items.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it. This is Oscar.
Do we have any discussion?
No comments or questions at this time.
All right, I'll call the question. All in favor? Mr. Bowl, please call.
Director Hermes,
Aye.
Director Fogel,
Aye.
Director Matthews,
Aye.
Director Modal,
Aye.
Director Metter,
Aye.
Director Carbonara,
Aye.
Director Eric,
Aye.
Chairman Patillo.
Aye.
Chairman, there are 8 votes in favor and none opposed.
Motion carries. Let's move into item number 7, the general manager CEO items.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have been putting off quarterly reports in hopes of having in-person meetings. I think the delivery just goes a little better when we do that, but that doesn't look like that's going to be in the future anytime soon. So we're going to start catching up on those quarterly reports this time. So we'll do a couple of those today. But initially, I'm going to ask Amanda Reichel, our safety manager, to give y'all an update to start. So I'll turn it over to Amanda.
Great. Thanks, Amanda.
Absolutely. Good morning. This is Amanda Reichel, Safety Risk Manager of GBRA. Good morning, Chairman and Directors. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you all today and discuss what GBRA has been doing towards our response in the COVID-19 pandemic. We've had very active reporting during the past month, and in that time, as of today, GBRA has experienced 8 positive cases throughout our county footprint. We saw this start to rise as the state reopened and people started to be out in the community more frequently. With our implementation of our reporting procedures, we've been able to understand each scenario case by case and closely monitor to follow up on each report. We've developed a Q&A guidance on returning to work for the scenarios that we're experiencing with COVID-related cases, and we continue to update employees and communicate recent changes to any state or federal guidance as applicable to our work. We're working, sorry, I did not advance the slide. Sorry about that. We're working closely with our operations, utilizing the contingency plans that we've put into place specific to COVID. and that includes isolating unaffected employees at certain locations so that we can continue business operations. We've exercised postponing some work tasks that can be delayed, which require a large-scale team effort or a buddy in order to minimize our risk of exposure. And where we cannot delay or postpone tasks, including working with contractors, we have team members wearing face coverings when they're working next to other individuals. We have a steady supply of PPE, including cleaning, disinfecting supplies at all of our locations, but we do continue to stay on top of our inventory and making sure that we have a bountiful supply at each of our sites. Our GBRA operations, our lobbies continue to remain closed to the public, and those that can telework, they continue to do so. We've kept with a shift rotation for those reporting to work to limit personal exposure and potential virus spread. We still urge staff to conduct telephonic meetings and remote meetings as much as possible. And in those, we limit the capacity of the size in each conference room. We are continuing with our self-health questionnaires before we report to work, as well as temperature screenings and checking prior to any entrance to offices or the field sites. We are maintaining the weekly cleaning and disinfectant measures by our professional services at our sites. And then, of course, we continue to monitor all of our county's data and reports for COVID positive cases, as well as the fatality rates. This graph here depicts the progression over each month in each county related to positive testing of COVID. And in here, you can see that Hays County has the highest count so far, recently followed by Victoria, Guadalupe, and Comal. And then Victoria County actually has the highest rate per capita in our footprint, as well as all of Texas. So these are hotspots that we want to be aware of so that we can understand and track the virus, how it's affecting our day-to-day activities, as well as outside of work. And then finally, our continued efforts do not stop as this virus is evolving and new reports come out weekly, if not more often, that we may need to take action on from GBRA's standpoint. We continue to monitor and assess the trends in our communities, and we evolve our approach as applicable. So that's all I have at this time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions, Mr. Chairman, at this time. Next, I will invite up David Harris to give you all an update on operations.
All right.
Morning, directors, board members. David Harris, Executive Manager for Operations. First thing I want to point out on my slide, it's not a wrong date. We started the presentation in March and we got shut down. So I wanted to go ahead and include that, not leave you behind on anything that we're working on. So we actually have 2 quarterly reports put together at this point in time. So some of the things are listed here are what we've covered before, just each one of the things that Amanda mentioned. Trying to come up with a plan. As she mentioned, we have had a few staff that were affected and we still have to keep our operations running. As I mentioned before, you can't wash your hands if you don't have water. So we're definitely an important business. And we're working very closely with Amanda and HR on all of those issues. First thing I want to cover is a 30-inch valve repair. This is on the regional raw water line close to Clear Springs at the pump station on Lake Dunlap. And we had a valve that went bad when we started a pigging operation this spring. The valve it shows to the left is a 380 turn valve. So since our guys don't have all week to open that valve, we have to put an actuator on it and actually help turn that valve. And what we had leaking by was a broken gate guide at the bottom. And the next picture will kind of show what that is. It's a plastic guide that, because we had just some debris and some mussels in that valve, this is one that's not used all the time, caused some pressure and caused that to break on that valve. And you can see the new one is replaced that. We did this with in-house staff. Some of the parts we bought, we had a representative from the company help us to put that on, but it was saved us a lot of money by doing this in-house ourselves. And we've come up with some protocol to clean that valve periodically, exercise it so we don't have those issues again. And you can see the adapter to the left. We put an adapter on here to where that electric actuator, we can mount that and turn that valve. So you see in red, you know, I love my job. How many people get to say they have a pig launcher in their business? I don't know that that's the proper term, but as you can see right there, when we pig the line, which is like putting a giant Nerf ball in the line to clean out debris, we have to put that in there, and it's very similar to a submarine tube. You can see the piping around. We close the door, put the pig inside there and push it through. And then this will go basically 24 miles to the San Marcos water treatment plant. So it is something that everybody can't say that they do. We talked earlier about an ROV that we purchased, and there's a picture of it. And a picture of the gates. We were using this to inspect our intakes to look for zebra mussels or any other type of issues that we might have. These are the intake gates in the wet well for raw water at Western Canyon. We had used it at the GPP pump station as well. And we've done some more inspections on the lower gates at Western Canyon as well. And we'll use it for tanks and other things to help us save money. It's also good if we need to see something in one of our facilities, we can do it right then instead of having to wait for a contractor as well. And you can see the zebra mussels on some of the pipes down there. They're not causing us any problems. The infestation you see right here, these are on basically this is steel rod that operates up and down. So they're not causing us any problem with operations. They are just there. And on the left-hand side, you can see that on the bottom, we have a bunch of zebra mussels, and the top part, we don't. That's where we had rehabbed some of the pipe and put a new coating on it. The coating does help keep them off, but eventually you can see through there, they will cover that up as well. So we're working, engineering department is helping us, and we have hired a consultant to develop a plan for mitigation. You know, what do we do now that we have the zebra mussels? It's not when we get them, we do have them. We worked together a plan with some contractors to remove the existing mussels before we do any chemical treatment. And we're looking long-term at adding a chemical treatment to prevent them from building up on our infrastructure and causing any issues. The reason we have to remove them is the chemicals that we'll use, not only will it keep them from forming, but it will kill the ones that are in there, and we need to remove those so we don't have a taste and odor issue like happened in Austin about a year ago. So we're ahead of the game and learning from others' issues. So Stein Falls Regional Lift Station. Stein Falls, as you may remember, is what we used to call the Dunlap Wastewater Treatment Plant. We've changed that name because we had too many Dunlaps. So it's that system run by Rudd. With the growth that we have out there, we need to increase some capacity. So working with engineering, they selected larger impellers, and we put in those pumps to upgrade them for capacity and added an additional pump for growth. To do that, we did it in-house. And like all projects that look good on paper, we end up with a few challenges. As you can see down at the bottom, we had some water shooting out one of the pipes. So what we had was corrosion, and you can see some of the holes in the pipes, a hole there and a hole against this flange from the ductile pipe that was there. On the right, you can see rags, and these are baby wipes, paper towels, different sanitary wipes that people are using. They say they're flushable and they will flush, but they don't go away. So they have wrapped around chains. And if you look to the left a little bit, you can see a guy standing there to give you an idea how big that pump is and how big this wad of rags is that's wrapped around there getting caught and everything. So our solution, we brought our in-house crews. You can see the tube to the left coming out here where the mouse is showing. That's off our combination vacuum truck that we bought this year. And so that tube on the right-hand side goes all the way down to the bottom, and there's the hard hat of the man that's down in there. And we cut up those rags, we cut up the debris, and then we were able to suck that out of there to where we could clean it out. You can see the cable and the harness as well. Also on the top left, you can see 2 blowers. We always have 2 blowers anytime we have anybody in a confined space. In case one fails, we already have another one operating. And you can see the hoist and winch that we have for safety. With continuous air monitoring, the guy laying down is monitoring gases to protect the staff, and we're bypass pumping around it at this point. So a few things that we did, we fabricated a drop tube, and that's what's shown in blue, the new PVC. And so originally from the top, the water just fell into the lift station, and that splashing would cause some off-gassing, and that would cause some of the corrosion that we had. So we developed this drop tube setup and built that in with some stainless steel brackets, and our guys welded and fabricated that, and it takes the water down to the bottom. We also, to the right, we replaced those discharge piping from the pumps up with HDPE, high density polyethylene pipe, and with stainless steel guides as well, and that'll help the corrosion on there until this lift station ultimately at some point will be replaced. We've had one inspection recently at Singing Hills. That was back several months ago. No violations were noted. All of our water and wastewater plants are meeting their parameters. We had a couple of exceedances recently, one on some flow back when it rained. We got some pretty big flow, and so we had a 2-hour peak, but nothing major that's going to cause long-term compliance issues. And all of our tier 2 reporting for all the locations for large volumes of hazardous chemicals, specifically usually chlorine. We met with all the emergency locators, turned all those reports in, and that's so that the fire department knows what's there if they have to respond to any type of problems. So we've met all of those requirements. Something that's new is they're looking at doing virtual inspections, which is kind of a new thing for us, but basically they're going to review records from their office. We will send them things. They'll give us a list of things. And so it'll be kind of a paperwork review on some of our water plants. The good news is they won't do that if they thought there were major problems. If we had a history of non-compliance or not meeting the requirements, we wouldn't get to have a paperwork video conference review. So that is a good sign for us. We've got one set up for a San Marcos water treatment plant and Luling as well coming up in coming weeks. So the Crestview wastewater plant, I know we've talked about it a lot. Well, here's some pictures of things really happening. Here's one of the aeration basins. I was down there as they were offloading from the truck. This is the one we moved from Dallas. It was called the Peninsula plant up there. And so you can see them picking it up. That's the largest aeration basin digester. We had a pad built by contractors, and it's built up a little bit higher. To the right-hand side, you can see the old plant, and this one's a little bit higher than the other one for storm waters and stuff. Keep water off of it as well. And you can see them setting it down. Clarifier is the round tank to the left coming off of the truck. We have a crew. We have a couple of guys that are very good fabricators, worked on pipeline crews before they came to work for us, and they're putting in the catwalks on top and to reestablish those. And then the walkway across here is new so that the operators can come up on top and walk across. At this point in the pictures, we do not have the handrails. When it's complete, there will be handrails across everything for protecting them. They were just getting those put in at the time. The small basin to the left here, you can see that's where the disinfection, that'll be our chlorine contact chamber. And you can see the ladders that come down across so the operator can come up on top of the plant, walk around to any place that he needs to clean or maintain or do any testing, and then circle back around. So there's a separate way to exit as well. And those again will have handrails. I think they're about probably 60 or 70% complete with all the handrails at this point in time. Moving to the next project at Sunfield, there are 2 plants side by side, and one of them we've been working on some rehab for it for quite a while. That is just complete. We started filling it yesterday on the startup. So the 2 plants were running side by side, and while the other one was being maintained and recoated and repainted. The airdrops that I've got the cursor on here, if you can see that, were sent off. We bought new pipe. We had them galvanized. We sent them off to be galvanized. On the bottom, there is a little header with 3 diffusers, and the diffusers are stainless steel. On the old plant, they broke loose from the carbon steel. So we sent those off. Our staff actually welded those and put those together. We sent those off to be galvanized as well. Then we put those back on as part of the repairs. You can see the new brass valves where my cursor is here. Each one of those valves we replaced while we had it down. The butterfly valve, the blue one here, we put all new valves on that for air control. There's a little valve right here, a 1 inch, that has not been replaced at the time of this picture. We have replaced it now as well, and changing coating, repairing the coating on the end of this airlift as well. This plant should have probably 15 years more life to it before we would have to do anything. With the growth of that subdivision, this plant will be way undersized years before we get to that point. So as far as major rehab, this should take care of it for its life cycle. We could use it for other potential treatment activities, and we'll just evaluate that at that time. Shadow Creek is just a few miles away, and it's a very similar situation. They started with a small plant. Later, as they grew, they had to have a little bit larger plant. And about 6 months ago, they ended up taking the smallest plant out and building another one. So there are 2 plants side by side. This one will have up to, I believe, 610,000 gallon a day permitted treatment. And you can see the new plant there as well. This is inside the clarifier, and they're getting close to being complete on it. There are new blowers. You can see are all encased, and you can see the stainless steel housing for protection against gases, but it'll have new blowers and then a new chlorine building. Here's the newer one, this size for the larger 2 plants together, and the old ones are shown right here. At Shadow Creek also, if you can see where my cursor is, there's a little bit of a retaining wall. And this is where the old lift station was. Originally, it was built kind of in a hole, and as the thing developed, we ended up getting water in it. So later, a retaining wall was built, but the lift station was just terribly undersized for peak rain events. So they built a new lift station. You can kind of see here, and you can see it's significantly higher, be above grade, so groundwater will not get into it. Capacity-wise, it's built for build out plus some, and there's a little over 3 times the capacity of the original lift station. This is one system that when it rained, the operators reported immediately there because they were going to have some issues. Lockhart Well 3 rehab. We started working on it. These are Carrizo wells with high iron, and they require a little more maintenance. We reviewed a video and decided just to use a chlorine shock, and that reduced the iron bacteria that grow down inside there. They would surge it back and forth with this chlorine solution, jet out any sand or debris that's in the bottom, and video the well. When we were jetting, we started seeing some larger sand particles that were more like a gravel pack around the screen. So we went back and videoed real close and found 2 holes about 1 inch and one about 2 inches around yesterday. The day before yesterday is when we found those. And so we're looking at getting some patches on those as well. Screen is in great shape, but this is on the carbon steel. So once we figure the best method to make that repair, we'll get with the city with a recommendation and move forward on that one. In Lockhart, we had to do some rehab as well on a clarifier. You can see how large it is with the guys working down in here. The guy in the yellow shirt is a contractor that came kind of as a consultant. I would say a working consultant because he worked with us. To the right is Richard Gonzalez, who is working in there, one of our plant operators. So we had to drain the clarifier. There's 2 of them, so we had one in operation beside it, and we replaced some of the components in there that had corrosion issues. To the left, you can see what we were taking out. These are tie rods and adjustments that were carbon steel, and there are very few threads on a lot of that. There was some severe sagging. To the right are the new components, and these are all stainless steel. So we replaced a lot of those components with stainless steel, so it will extend that life for years. By doing the work in-house, I don't remember the number, but it's several $1,000s, tens of thousands, honestly, that we saved by doing that work as well. To go down south a little bit, this is at the saltwater barrier where the river comes across as well. This excavator, if you look at the top of the cab, is somewhere about 12 foot tall, and that's to give you some size of how tall the pile of logs is that they've stacked up. To the left, you can see the boat, and it has it's kind of a bulldozer, if you will. These are the things that they've broken loose and have come loose in flood water right at the saltwater barrier. And then the long reach excavator, they'll stack these up. It may take months for these to dry because they've been submerged. Once they get to a point in the wintertime when we don't have any fire issues, we will burn those. Training has had to change without in-person classes. We've done a lot of stuff online that we can do through our insurance provider. There are a lot of videos as well that we can do. So here's some of the training that some of our staff have taken. Some of the core classes, basic water, basic wastewater, we can take for licensing. Testing just really opened up about 30 days ago, and it's very hard to get in for upgrades on licenses, but there is the ability to do that as well. We're not doing the weekly tailgate meetings and monthly safety meetings at the location as we had before because we're trying to stay separate, but we're still providing the training by handing them and sometimes through email the information, having them go through, take some tests and quizzes so we can keep up on training as well. Picture here, this is the effluent. You can see how pretty and clear this is. This is at the Larimore plant in Lockhart, one of the plants that we have, and that's an aerial picture of that plant as well. So do y'all have any questions or anything about our operations for the last few months?
Any questions?
There are no questions or comments at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Great presentation.
Next, I'll ask Charlie Hickman to give you all an update on engineering.
Good morning, Chairman and Directors. This is Charlie Hickman. Just want to give you a status update on the activities of engineering in 2020. Start off by showing you a picture of our staff here. This was the last time that we were all in the same place pre-pandemic right here. This is a photo of us all at the Western Canyon Water Treatment Plant. And what you might notice is there's a couple of faces in here you haven't seen before, and I've been waiting for the opportunity to introduce them to you. But we have in the back see, I can point right here. You've got Mick Griffin. He's our new project engineer. He comes to us from a construction firm that managed concrete construction. And we also have Brian Peterson, who's our new electrical instrumentation control specialist that came to us from Alterman Construction. And so collectively, these staff right now, everybody you see in the photo, after a closeout of several large projects, we're currently responsible for managing about 10 million of design contracts for GBRA capital improvements and about $18 million that are in the construction phase right now for GBRA. On top of that, we do a lot of developer-driven utility projects. There's 35 of those that we're currently providing plan review for, and 50 of those projects that are currently being inspected by our inspections division. So this is a busy group of people right here. And just 4 years ago, all of this was being managed with a group of 4. So we really appreciate the opportunity of giving us to grow this department. It really wasn't just driven around the significant workload. It's also about expanding our technical expertise and customer service. So I'll touch base on some of the things we've done to further that in 2020. One of the goals for our department, we will never reach a point to where we have a workload that's large and consistent enough to where we would do entire projects from a design perspective in-house, but we do have a goal of expanding our planning capabilities. Like when we're looking at a new plant, for example, it would really improve efficiency in the design process if we had the bandwidth and expertise for internal staff to work with our operations department, pick a treatment process and do the basic layout of the plant before we turn it over to a consulting engineer to give us final plans and specifications. And so that's a big part of growing our staff. We also have a similar initiative on doing our own collection and distribution system modeling. So this year we purchased a software program that allows us to do that type of modeling. It's InnoVise. We have InfoWater and InfoSewer, and in conjunction with our IT department and GIS, we've been able to get that up and running. And several of our systems are already modeled in that software package, and we're utilizing those to start doing our own planning. So you see on the left, we've got our regional raw water delivery system to San Marcos, along with our Western Canyon transmission systems currently modeled in that software. Our Stein Falls collection system that's shown here on the map, and our Calhoun County rural water system are all currently models we have up and running, and we're working towards getting the remainder of our systems up and running in that modeling software. Currently, Brian's taken the lead on modeling our raw water system for the Lockhart wells to do some analysis there. So we're excited to be growing those capabilities. On the customer service side, we've also implemented some inspections reporting. With 50 of those projects, it's quite a bit of workload, but the goal in doing that communication process on the front end is to minimize some of our communication on the back end of a project when you get down to closeout phase. A lot of this is based around the developers who pay for these projects really only have communication with the contractors they work with. And GBRA inspectors have direct communication with those contractors. So part of this process, part of the reason for implementing this process was just to increase that communication amongst all parties to where we're putting out a weekly report that kind of gives the developers a sense of what GBRA crews are seeing out in the field on a weekly basis as they communicate with their contractor. So, I talked about having 50 projects that are in the construction phase, and that may be several projects that are within one system. Like we have a subdivision we're providing inspections for named 4S, and right now there's 4 different housing units that are concurrently under construction. And so, while that may seem to be one project, you're typically dealing with a different design engineer and sometimes a different contractor. So it's really, kind of individually managed units that we're providing these reports for. And this also helps provide better backup documentation because we do bill some of these developers for the inspection services. So it gives good documentation on those services that they're paying for. I'll move on to touch base on some of our our projects, and I'll start off with the Carrizo Groundwater Supply Project. This first section is about the status of some of the shared facilities that we're implementing with the Alliance Regional Water Authority. To remind you, our contract with Alliance puts them directly responsible for doing the design and construction of really all of the facilities, starting at the water treatment plant and working all of the pipelines that lead up to the individual customer delivery points. And so we both have shared capacity in the majority of what you see on this screen. Each color is an individual design contract, so it's split up into 5 different contracts, and we have shared interest in most of those pipeline segments, with the exception of this segment C that's strictly for Alliance customers. So we're closely monitoring and working in conjunction with Alliance on the implementation of the remaining sections here, and they're kind of working that where they've started focusing their efforts on the upstream end of the project and are working their way down the line. So pipeline segments A and B, they're kind of the east-west projects, are currently at 60% design that's been submitted for owner review, and we are participating with Alliance and providing some comments on that review process. Pipeline segment D and E, they're out there completing preliminary engineering and wrapping up field work to move into final design for those segments. There's a booster pump station located right here, very close to where our San Marcos water treatment plant is. That's also at 60% design and in review, along with the water treatment plant, also at 60% design. So there's been some good progress on the design activities. The inline elevated tanks, they're currently in the preliminary design for those assets. So what that all means from a scheduling perspective here, the activities in kind of the bars in blue are the design and construction related activities. And just touch on a couple of things that have changed since the last time we updated you on the status of this project. When we were first discussing this back in preliminary engineering, the water treatment plant was really on the critical path for the last thing to come online before we could start water deliveries. Right away is always a challenge with every project, and due to some issues on acquiring the right of way for the project, there has been a little bit of a delay in a couple of the pipeline segments that have now put the pipeline segments that are at the far end of the project on the critical path. I mean, we still feel, based on the status of the project, that providing water by June of 2023, which is our contractual obligation or goal, is still definitely feasible. It just changes the components that are going to come online last. And the only component you see here, segment C, that's past that goal is that segment that is strictly for Alliance customers. So all of the GBRA segments still appear to be on target. Right away is there was some float built into the schedule, so we're not right now feeling like we're in threat of not meeting the targeted deadlines, which you see the green bars are right away. So the earlier segments we're expecting to wrap up towards the end of this calendar year, and then moving into the second quarter of 2021 before Alliance needs to wrap up the remaining right of way segments. And so that's still 9 months out and a very achievable goal, but there's a lot of parcels to be acquired. This chart kind of shows the general status of right-of-way acquisition. The top shows right of entry, and they're completely done with getting all the right of entries and have almost completely confirmed the alignments across, with the remaining, just a very small portion of the final pipe-like segment remaining for confirmation of the route. But the bottom table shows you the status of the actual easement acquisitions. And so you can see that there's 178 parcels, which is a really large number that are required for this long length of pipeline. The approach that Alliance is using, before they will make any initial offer on acquiring the easements, they have an appraisal prepared. About 60% of those appraisals have been done at this point in time. And with that number, about half of the parcels, they've provided initial offer letter to the landowners. And that initial offer letter really starts to set your clock for a final deadline for either acquiring the easement or getting into a eminent domain type proceeding, which everybody tries to avoid as much as possible. And at this point in time, about 13% of the right-of-way has been acquired. So it is moving along. This was last month's update. We have a monthly project management committee that meets monthly to review the status of this, and we're meeting on Friday this week to get our latest update. To touch base on some of the portions of the project that we're solely responsible for, as a reminder, to serve both Lockhart and NBU, we are designing some extensions that come off of the Alliance main that get to our customer delivery points. And so here shows you a figure of the Lockhart line. This line in purple here is Alliance's Segment A pipeline. And so we're providing the design and construction of this additional leg of pipeline to get to Lockhart's delivery point. We did have some slowdowns in obtaining the right of entry for that, but we have completed that and completed all of the field work for survey and geotechnical. And we are anticipating, based on that field work, having a 50% design for review submitted to us in September. For the smaller leg to New Braunfels, pretty similar status. It's slightly ahead. We've completed all that field work. We are having some negotiations and discussions with the landowner about potentially adjusting this route, but we still do anticipate a 50% design for this pipeline in August next month. On the well fields, just to remind you, it's really split up into two different packages. There's a design and construction package for the drilling of the wells themselves, and Brian will give you an update on that in an upcoming item. And then there's a separate package for all of the pumps on the surface and all of the pipelines that will get the water to the shared treatment plant with Alliance. We're really ahead of where we need to be on design of that. We've got a long length of float from when we're going to complete the design before we actually need to bid the project to meet our target of having all these raw water systems in the ground and up and running by the third quarter of 2022. And just yesterday we had a review with our consultant to go over the status of the 90% design and provide them our comments. So we're ahead of where we need to be from a design perspective on that piece of the project. There's one other component that I didn't provide a slide for, but we are also doing some upgrades to the high service pump station at our San Marcos water treatment plant, where we will pump that water up our existing I-35 treated line to our Goforth. We're also anticipating in August a 60% design for those improvements. So any questions on the Carrizo project before I move on to some of our other projects? Okay. Moving on to some of our collection system projects, and on the wastewater side, this is our Stein Falls project. To remind you, this is based on some master planning we did in the past. This project is, it's pretty substantial. It's just under 3 miles of force main and 5 miles of gravity main that'll be going in the ground. We're currently reviewing the final design package, so we're very close to just a few weeks away from having a package that's ready to go out to bid. That's currently in staff review. And really what's driving the schedule for bidding that project at this point is right-of-way acquisition. We have about 35 parcels that we need to acquire right-of-way from to implement this project. Right now, we've already completed signing or closing on about 20 of those properties, and 6 of those we anticipate having closed in the very near future. 9 of those have been authorized by you for eminent domain proceedings. We've only had 1 hearing so far. We do have 5 of those hearings scheduled for July and August, and the remaining 3 we're hoping we can negotiate before we reach that point. So we're proceeding in those negotiations, and so our goal is to be able to bid this project this year to get everything online, because we have a tremendous amount of growth in the system, probably more than any of our other areas. Even seeing the impacts of COVID, we've been monitoring that, and the developers that are providing projects in this area have given us no indication that they're slowing down at all. Just to show you how many different inquiries we're dealing with. The parcels or polygons you see on this map in green is where we currently provide existing service, and the ones in orange are contracted for service but not yet in the ground. All of those different tracks you see in red there are inquiries that have come to us and asked about what it would take to obtain service from our system, and we have active negotiations going on the majority of those tracks. And then what's shown in yellow is some additional areas that we expect would be coming to us in the very near future for additional service. So just a that system is really growing, and we definitely have a need to get this project in the ground as fast as possible still, even with the impacts of COVID. So we're progressing that as fast as we can. Similar on the other side of the river. So, that area we were just discussing is our existing service area shown right here. We did apply last year for a new CCN that would dictate our service area on the opposite side of the river. That's shown in green. We've designed, completed, and design and bid a project to implement the collection system that would serve that first part of that service system. That's known as our Dietz wastewater project. The bids that we received were $2.1 million for the lift station and $3.3 million for the associated pipelines. We provided notice to proceed for that project back in July, and it's a 10-month timetable. So we expect we'll have that system online in April of next year, ready to provide service. And we do have active negotiations with the developers in that area as well about obtaining service. Here's a slide that shows you what that first phase project really looks like. This is State Highway 46. And so we're putting in this darker line you see here is a gravity main that we're putting in that will run back around a hill to a lift station on the western end of this project, or the eastern end of this project. And then it will pump water back to NBU's existing collection system. And we have a contract with them to provide service at their existing McKenzie wastewater treatment plant. A couple of quick updates on projects I don't have slides for in Calhoun County for the Port Lavaca water treatment plant. The city council had engaged a third-party consultant to provide a review of our consultant's plan for implementing that project. They came up with a phased approach for how they felt the plant could be implemented on a much longer timetable than just building it all at once, which is what GBRA had proposed for cost efficiency. We've had the opportunity to review that report, and tomorrow we're going to be giving the city council an update on the findings of GBRA's findings of that report. We do have some differences of opinion on the water quality measures that are proposed for the plant, as well as the delaying of certain critical infrastructure like electrical systems that we're going to give them an update on tomorrow. And with Calhoun County, they recently obtained a grant from the Matagorda Bay Mitigation Trust that was part of a settlement with Formosa, and that settlement outlined that there was $10 million of funding that would be provided towards implementation of a park at Green Lake, and also earmarked $2 million of that for some hardening of erosion concerns that happen where the Green Lake overflows into our canal system. We just met with the commissioners earlier this week and laid out a process to where we would leverage our technical expertise to manage that project and utilize our consultant to provide those design services. And so we're currently negotiating a memorandum of understanding with the county to provide those services, and we're happy that we can utilize that funding to help improve our canal system down there, or our lower Guadalupe diversion system. Any questions from the board on status of our projects?
Director Matter, did you have a question earlier?
Yes, I was just wanting to check and make sure that we were still pleased with our relationship with Alliance in getting this joint project put together.
Absolutely. Like I said, we meet with them monthly and we have discussions with them on almost a daily basis. We're happy with the status. We understand the challenges of implementing such a large project, but right now everything appears to be on target. Communication is great, and they've been really helpful in being timely with communication. We need to communicate status of the project to our customers. So it's been a great relationship.
Thanks.
Not seeing any other comments or questions at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. You've really been busy, Charlie. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
So those are the quarterly reports for this time. Mr. Chairman, we'll catch you up at the August board meeting. We'll add a couple more managers for y'all to hear from, but I would like to just compliment and thank David and Charlie and their teams for how they've adjusted during this time that we're in. As you can see, that we provide some very, and as y'all were well aware, very critical services, and we can't just hit pause, and they've adjusted and kept things on track, even though it's had to be via conference call and Zoom call, and they've done a tremendous job in doing that. So I don't have anything else for the GM items, and we can jump into action items.
And so we will. Let's move to action item number 8, consideration of and possible action authorizing the general manager CEO to negotiate and execute an engineering service agreement to assist with preparation of a developer resources guide. I'll entertain a motion.
This is Don Metter. I so move.
Do I have a second?
This is Kenneth Model. I'll second.
All right, Mr. Hickman, discussion.
Well, thank you. This project really it's got a technical component and a customer service component. I'll touch on that briefly. On the technical side, we have maintained our own set of standards and design guidelines for quite some time. You can see the 3 different sets of guidelines we have are related to the types of projects we most commonly implement: treatment plants, lift stations, utility projects, and then water delivery points for our customers. Those were last updated in 2018. And really the purpose for these, the standards were mostly written around projects that are implemented by developers, and a developer's interest is mostly geared towards developing the most affordable project. And from our perspective, we're looking for the highest quality project for our operations. And so the purpose of these standards is to really protect our interests, and the purpose for this project is to open up those standards for the latest revision. And part of doing that update, we want to include a stakeholder-driven process to where the developer's interests are also considered as we update these standards, and try to achieve that best balance between cost and quality as we implement and inspect these projects. So what we have scoped is to hire a third-party consultant to facilitate that stakeholder process, and they would solicit input from the development community, including developers, consulting engineers, contractors that we work with, and our own operators as we try to refine these standards. And then following that, would sit down with our operations group and comb through that and try to provide a technical update to these standards that really achieves that balance. Concurrent with that, I showed you the significant number of developments that were requests that we're fielding. We've never committed to paper a lot of our guidelines for obtaining service from GBRA. That's something that we've refined through multiple contracts, but part of this project, we would also like to put together a public-facing document that outlines what our policies and procedures are for obtaining new service. And so some of the key components of that would be developing a development checklist or flow chart that gives people an understanding of all of the steps they're going to go through and who their key points of contact are through that process. Outline our process for calculating connection fees for new service. This would not include defining our rates. That's something that the board of directors will set annually as part of our budgeting process, but outlining, what types of developments would be, like how many, connections would be considered for a commercial development for different types of, apartments or office buildings and such would be defined in this document. So we'd have a defined approach towards how that connection fee relates to each development. Include our policies for what size of easements would be required for offsite improvements. Typically, when a developer comes to a utility and wants to build a new subdivision or obtain new service, they are required to design and construct any improvements that are outside of their development that are required to get to tie into the owner's existing system. And that's the general guideline that we follow. So sometimes with that model, it makes sense for the utility to participate in that construction by oversizing those improvements for future developments. And so we would outline our policies and procedures for the calculations of who pays for what percentage of the project when we do oversize. And also there may be certain situations where it is in our best interest to participate in the infrastructure itself. Like if a large regional lift station would be needed to serve that development, that we would also open up our service area. We would outline, which situations would merit GBRA participation in that offsite utility construction. So putting up those documents together is the goal of the project. We've already released the RFQ, and the proposals will be due tomorrow. We'd be reviewing them next week and anticipate awarding that contract by the end of the month with your blessing to move forward.
All right. We have a motion on the floor and a second. Do we have any discussion?
There are no comments or questions at this time, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Bowl, would you call the directors?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Tom Bowl. Director Hermes,
Aye.
Director Fogel,
Aye.
Director Matthews,
Aye.
Director Modal,
Aye.
Director Metter,
Aye.
Director Carbonara,
Aye.
Director Ehrig,
Aye.
Chairman Patillo.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, there are 8 votes for and none opposed.
Motion carries. Let's move to number 9, consideration of and possible action authorizing the general manager, CEO to negotiate and execute an engineering service agreement to prepare inundation mapping for modeling for the Guadalupe Valley hydroelectric system. I'll entertain that motion.
It's Oscar, so moved.
This
Have
is
a
Don,
second?
this is Don Metter, second.
Thank you, Charlie. Would you lay it out?
Yes, sir. So this project in a nutshell is really about, and there's nobody at GBRA that's not aware of the difficulty that we face in providing public understanding of how our hydroelectric lakes interact with the river in a flooding condition. It's something that's just not intuitive and not easily understood by the general public or the emergency management community. So really the goal of this project is to develop some maps and tools that allow the local emergency managers to better communicate what's going to happen in a flood event with the public. And here's kind of an example of the types of products we'd be wanting to develop. So this is an existing service the National Weather Service provides for the Seguin area. What you'll see is that it's tied to the Seguin USGS gauge, and it's very specific only to Meadow Lake, but it does demonstrate the types of products we want to provide. So you can kind of see, at different flood levels, it provides an inundation map with depth. So the darker blue you are, the deeper the water is. And so it kind of shows you, right here's an example of a moderate flood moving into a more major flood. And then here's, giving a demonstration of what the flood of record looked like, which would be the 98 flood for this area. So, we want these types of products for the entirety of our hydroelectric system, just for better communication during these types of events. But there's a number of challenges that we're trying to overcome. And so because of all the challenges in developing those models, that was our main goal with getting involved in FEMA several years ago. And we entered into a cooperating technical partnership with FEMA to try to get all the technical work done to develop those models. And it's something that we've been doing in phases over time. So you may recall back in fiscal year 15 and 17, we obtained grants from FEMA to go out and do surveys of the lake bottoms to help improve those models. One of the deficiencies in the models was that they did not have very good survey data for the lake beds, and that can affect, the height of the inundation during these different types of flood events. And so we've completed those efforts on all 6 of the lakes. And then in fiscal year 18, we got a grant award from FEMA for the modeling and inundation mapping for Lake Dunlap. And then following that in fiscal year 19, we got the grant award for the remaining 5 lakes. During that time, however, FEMA on their own initiated a modeling update of this leg of the system or of the river system. And so we had to put this project on hold while we waited for FEMA to complete those modeling updates. They have now completed those modeling updates, and so we are looking to move forward and start turning those models into inundation maps. And so really what we're going to be doing is combining two different modeling efforts, that 2020 completed FEMA modeling effort. And then we did some very robust modeling that you'll recall with Black & Veatch to try to model what would happen in the event of a spillgate breach following the failure of Dunlap. And so, really combining those two models into one is really what we need to do to provide a better understanding of the inundation maps. And so the Black & Veatch model, its benefit is that all of the overland areas in the riverbank are modeled as two-dimensional, whereas a standard river model is just one dimension. And so that two-dimensional model lets you look at more complicated overflow situations like, we had a good demonstration of this near Turtle Lane on Lake Placid. So with those 2D models, you can start to see when flow actually exits the river channel during a certain event. So with these models, we'll be able to define for the emergency managers, at what flow rate can you expect water to start to leave the river channel, and how deep is it going to get over your access roads? So they will have an understanding when we can report to them a discharge that we're seeing at our dams. They will know, how much time do they have to respond to get people evacuated from certain areas. And so really what we will do with this project is run, these models at every range of flows we would expect to see in every gate setting on our hydro dams, so that we have a whole series of different inundation maps that we can provide to them, as these events develop. So we have already issued an RFQ for this project as well, and the submittals will be due on July the 20th. This project is entirely funded with that FEMA grant, but GBRA will be providing the administration of implementing that project. So we do expect to issue that contract with your blessing by the end of this month as well.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
There are no comments or questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bowl, would you poll the directors?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Tom Bull. Director Hermes,
Aye.
Director Fogel,
Aye.
Director Matthews,
Aye.
Director Modal,
Aye.
Director Metter,
Aye.
Director Carbonaro,
Aye.
Director Herring,
Aye.
Chairman Patillo.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, there are 8 votes in favor and none opposed.
Motion carries. Let's move to 10, consideration of and possible action authorizing the general manager, CEO, to negotiate and execute a contract with the highest ranked bidder for the construction of the Carrizo groundwater supply project well drilling package. I'll entertain a motion.
This is Don Metter. I so move.
I have a second.
This is Kenneth Model. I'll second it.
All right. Would you lay out the motion?
Yes. Good morning, directors. I wanted to brief you on the agenda item here. First of all, the Carrizo groundwater supply project. Charlie kind of
Would you identify yourself real quickly?
This is Brian Perkins from engineering.
Thanks.
The Carrizo groundwater supply project. Charlie kind of gave you an overview of the project and our coordination with Alliance Regional Water Authority. This is specific to the well drilling package, which went out to bid on July 2nd of this year. So the package itself has contained 7 Carrizo aquifer wells being drilled, including development testing. We'll collect some water quality sampling, disinfect the wells. We'll get video logging from that as well, and they'll verify the alignment of that well, of the 7 wells. Sorry, these wells are about 1,200 feet deep. They range, but they're roughly about 1,200 feet deep. And this construction package also includes building of flexible base roads for access to those well sites. Once again, here's a map of the Carrizo groundwater supply project, our components as well as the shared components with Alliance. As you can see, the area we're talking about today is really this area here, the GBRA well field area, specific to the wells within this blue blob. So I want to zoom in there for a minute, show you what we're talking about. Here's the 7 wells. They're numbered, roughly 1 being the furthest away from the water treatment plant over here. 2, 3, 4, 5 coming back, 6 and 7. Just like the topography in this area where things are sloping towards the coast, the aquifer as well slopes towards the coast as well. So well 1, which is here, is the furthest away from the water treatment plant, but also the deepest well. And we have it in the contract documents to drill that well first. That'll give us the water quality information we need to get to the water treatment plant designer that Alliance is managing. Concurrently, Alliance is drilling their first 4 wells, and they will have some of the more shallow wells. So between our water quality information and the water quality information from the Alliance group, the water treatment plant designer will have a good range of values for what is expected out of the aquifer. The typical well construction here, showing you the casing going down, as well as the screened area here. Some information here for each of the 7 wells. You can see again, they range in depth from that most shallow well, which is the furthest one west, about 1,100 feet deep, to our deepest one, which is the one I pointed out before, about 1,260 feet deep. We are using competitive sealed proposals in here. The scoring in here allows us to select not only a good bid price, but also a driller that has good experience and has key personnel involved. You can see the scoring values associated with this. It is weighted heavy or towards the construction price, obviously, but we are going to get experience with similar projects, hopefully in the Carrizo area. Qualification of the personnel, and then of course the project approach and schedule will be weighted as well. So for each bid each proposal we get, we will score those accordingly based on these 4 categories, and come up with a total score of up to 100 points. We'll select the highest scoring proposer. The schedule here I mentioned went out for bid July 2nd of this year. We actually have a pre-proposal meeting tomorrow. We'll be holding that virtual. It is mandatory. We'll have a deadline for questions next week, and we expect to get the proposals in by July 30th. Anticipate the award about a month later and give notice to proceed shortly thereafter. The total construction time is estimated to be about a year, so September 1st of next year, we'll have these 7 wells up and running and available. We have gone through the TWD review process as part of the SWIFT funding. They've reviewed the contract documents before they went out for bid, and we received their comments and addressed them. And with that, we do have this action item for you. Any questions?
All right, any questions?
Director Carbonara?
How long has GBRA been using the scoring system, or is that something new that we're doing?
I do not know off the top of my head. I think this is a relatively new scoring that we're doing. This is the first time I've used it in a project I've been involved with, but of course I've been with GBRA for about 9 months now.
So again, it's Will Carbonara, sorry. So like in theory, the lowest price is going to get 40 points and then a percentage off of that gets that, or arbitrarily you give a point number based on where you feel the price is compared to the others? I mean, how does that work, or how does that facilitate exactly?
That's a good question. I believe, the lowest bidder will probably get 40 points, and then I think there's a set schedule in terms of the next lowest would get a certain amount of points.
Yeah, and Director Carbonara, this is Charlie Hickman. It's really set up. It's a process we've used on several other projects, especially the larger, more complicated projects, to where we ensure that we're not just selecting a contractor that gives us the low bid. This gives us the flexibility to make sure the contractor's providing us the right design or the right construction team to implement this project, and they have the experience on the types of projects that we're scoping. So, I mean, it's really the model of what we like to use on all of our larger projects to make sure we're getting the right contractor for the job.
Thanks.
Director Fogel?
Let me get now. Okay, I'm unmuted now. This Oscar. Brian, you talking about these well packages and the 7 wells you're going to drill in this initial project. I see that some of those wells are going to be up in Caldwell County, the other ones down in Gonzales County. And that's right in an area where there's a conflict between 2 different regulating entities. Have y'all already got the permits for that? Or who's doing that work for get the permits?
That's a good question. I'll go back to here. Actually, this, there we go. So this part of Caldwell County is actually regulated by the Gonzales County Groundwater Conservation District. And so the Plum Creek District is, I think the line is more over towards this area here. So, but this area of Caldwell falls under the Gonzales County Underground Water Conservation District. We do have all the permits necessary for this project already from the Groundwater Conservation District. We are dealing with only one entity in terms of regulatory.
Well, I'm sure that you checked for all the snakes, but that area you're saying it's in Caldwell County under the Gonzales Groundwater District is also claimed by the Plum Creek Conservation District underground. And there was admitted defugally in the laws, but they got 2 entities, and that has not been resolved to my knowledge. And so it's going to end up in the courts deciding who's got the jurisdiction. But you say you got the permit from Gonzales.
We do, yeah.
But there's been no communication with the Plum Creek Conservation District.
Not that I'm aware of.
I'd sure check that out before y'all go too far into that. Thank you.
Are there any other comments, questions?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Bowl, please poll the directors.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tom Bowl. Director Hermes,
Aye.
Director Fogel,
Aye.
Director Matthews,
Aye.
Director Model,
Aye.
Director Metter,
Aye.
Director Carbonara,
Aye.
Director Eric,
Aye.
Chairman Patillo.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, there are 8 votes in favor and none opposed.
Motion carries. Let's move to item number 11, consideration of and possible action authorizing the general manager CEO to negotiate and execute a lower basin firm water supply agreement with Ineos Nitriles USA LLC. I'll entertain a motion.
So move this, Oscar.
Have a second.
This is Don Metter. I second.
Thank you. Daryl, will you or Tom lay this out? Daryl.
I drew the straw for this one. Good morning, directors. This is Daryl Nichols with GBRA. So we've been working with Ineos on a contract that they have to purchase raw water from GBRA down in our lower basin area. We've been working on this contract for some time now. The current contract had expired in February, but we extended it just a bit so that we could complete this. The key thing on this agreement, though, is this also incorporates our ability to do the lower basin project and be able to use this contract and the revenues from it to support that. This is going to be the model that we use for other entities in the basin, in the lower basin as well, for developing our lower basin off-channel reservoir in the future. This contract also starts the process of Ineos paying for the full amount of the raw water that they're going to be allocated for over a period of time. So Ineos is taking some time to negotiate with this private entity who's headquartered over in Europe, but it's been a successful endeavor, and it's going to be a model that we use for other entities, other industries in the lower basin as well. I can answer any questions.
Wow. Directors, any questions?
There are none at this time, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Bowl, please poll the directors.
All right, Mr. Chairman, if you'll bear with me, I was in the room with Daryl. I'm going to go back out and I'll call the roll as soon as I get there. Mr. Chairman, this is Tom Bowl again, and if the directors will state their vote, as I call their names, I'll begin. Director Hermes.
Aye.
Director Fogel.
Aye.
Director Matthews.
Aye.
Director Model.
Aye.
Director Metter.
Aye.
Director Carbonara,
Aye.
Director Eric,
Aye.
Chairman Patillo.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, there are 8 votes in favor and none opposed.
All right, the motion carries. That brings us to discussion items. We haven't
Right.
seen you for a while, Mr. Hickman.
And you won't be surprised to hear that it's been hot and dry over the past month. I'm sure that's no shocker to anybody. So here's really what that's looked like. Our normal 30-day rainfall for the late June, early July periods in the about 3 to 4 inch range for most of our basin, and we've really seen more about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of rain in some areas, and a little bit more down closer to the coast. But we've had a really dry month and extremely hot. And over the last 60 days, we're not in too bad of a deficit really across the basin. We've received 75 to 90% of our normal rainfall for this year. But with the extremely hot conditions, you're seeing some well below median flows across most of the river, pretty much throughout. You see right now, I'll point out that the inflow into Canyon Reservoir right now is only just under 30 CFS, and we're releasing around 60 CFS, which is the minimum release for our water supply. We are still in the drought provisions of the permit for Canyon. With that lack of rainfall across the recharge zone and getting into peak summer use, the J17 index well has gone down below the trigger for drought stage 1. So for the first time in 2 years, we're in critical period stage 1 conditions for the Edwards. And a reminder of what that looks like. That again is based on the 10-day average getting below the 660 in that index well, and that requires that all of the Edwards pumpers have a 20% reduction on their withdrawals. And so in order to implement that, entities like SAWS and New Braunfels and others have implemented their stage 1 watering restrictions to try to curtail that use. And so we'll watch the aquifer. If it declines another 10 feet, then they would get into the stage 2 condition. Looking at the Canal Springs, it still remains above the trigger for stage 1. And we're still tracking really close to the average spring flow for this time of year. The springs are currently flowing at 260 CFS, and you can see that the stage 1 trigger is based on the 10-day average getting down below 225 CFS. So we're still a ways above that, but the critical period was likewise triggered just because of the J17 level. Canyon is still in relatively good shape with the dry conditions. We're about 1.5 feet below conservation storage. Looking at the drought monitor for the state, most of our basin is still not in a drought category, but if we continue on with these conditions, we can expect that to develop. And you can see some of the surrounding hill country regions are starting to get pushed into that dry category. So drought's starting to spread across the state with the hotter conditions. Looking at the outlook right now, they are predicting that when we get into the winter period, there's a 50 to 55% chance of the La Nina condition developing, which in the winter and fall period can be construed to lead to a drier forecast for Texas. So we'll see what happens there. But in the immediate 3-month future, what they are predicting is well above average chance of extreme high temperatures, and we've certainly been seeing that. But they are showing that in the next 3 months, we do have an above average chance of rainfall. So hopefully that can occur because we definitely need it. So any questions on the drought report?
There are no questions at this time.
All right. So that brings us to the point of the meeting that we will move into executive session. I show that it's 11:24 a.m. and I would suggest that we take a 16-minute break, and at 11:40, let's be prepared, if it's all right with everyone, to go into executive session.
Sounds good. Mr. Chairman, just real quick, just a reminder that there's a separate call-in line for the board members to call into executive session. and we will update y'all on mainly all things related to Hydro Lakes litigation, but there is a possibility for those who are listening in the public that we may come back into open session for an action item for the board to address.
Very well. Let's log off this open session right now, and I will talk to you now in 15 minutes for executive session. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I'd like to call roll and just make sure everybody's back on.
Please do.
Thank you. This is Tom. Director Hermes?
Present.
Director Fogel? Director Matthews?
Present.
Director Modal?
Here.
Director Metter?
Here.
Director Carbonara?
Here.
Director Ehrig?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you're on the line, so I think we're missing Director Fogel.
I'm here, Tom. I couldn't get my damn thing to unmute. You can hear me now?
Yes, sir, I can, and I totally get that. Mr. Chairman.
All right. We are at 1:05, and I would reconvene in open session the board meeting for the Guadalupe-Blanco River Authority and call on Mr. Bowl.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tom Bowl. We have covered legal and settlement issues relating to the case of Sconard versus GBRA. And now in open session, we're recommending to the board that they approve authority for Mr. Pattison to finalize 3 agreements which would address the settlement in the Sconard case. One is giving him authority to negotiate and execute a final settlement agreement with the parties in the Sconard case to settle the litigation. And then as part of that, giving him authority to negotiate and execute a final operating and financing agreement with Lake McQueeney Water Control and Improvement District, and also a similar agreement with Lake Placid Water Control and Improvement District. If you have any, well, we can talk a little bit about some of the terms that have been suggested for those. Among them are that the settlement agreement would relate a little bit to preserving water levels in Lake Placid and Lake McQueeney at what is defined as normal operating levels, and those would be what the levels were on September 11th, 2019, very similar to the current temporary injunction that's in place in the Sconard case. There would be a plan by which the repairs on Lake McQueeney Dam and Lake Placid Dam would be financed. It would include GBRA applying for financing from the Texas Water Development Board, which we've already made application. It would hopefully include 0% interest or low interest financing for the project. The 2 water control and improvement districts would levy taxes to pay for the construction and expenses relating to the repair of the dams that would be used to pledge revenues for bonds that GBRA would issue. GBRA would provide its revenues from hydroelectric generation from each dam to the water control and improvement districts, the WCIDs, for payment of either operating expenses or for debt retirement or debt service as the WCIDs see fit. I mentioned lake levels being at a certain level. In addition, we would work on the engineering, and to varying extents, our expenses for engineering costs would be paid for. The districts, go ahead, Daryl may have some things to add, Mr. Chairman. The districts would be able to put the item of their taxation levy and their confirmation of their creation on the November ballot, and would also have the option to do it again in the following 2 election cycles through December 31st, 2021. In the event that COVID-19 or some unforeseen force majeure were to prevent them from having an election during that period, there could be an extension of that. And we would proceed with the project as described. And upon the effective date of the agreement, the settlement agreement, the plaintiffs in the Sconard case would dismiss the case without prejudice, or move to dismiss the case without prejudice. Daryl, is there any other terms that we ought to add? I think that basically sums it up. And again, what we would ask the board to consider is those three motions. One, to authorize Kevin to negotiate and execute a settlement with the Sconard plaintiffs. Two, to authorize him to negotiate and execute a final agreement and operating and financing agreement with Lake McQueeney WCID. And third, the same type of agreement with Lake Placid WCID. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Mr. Chairman, this is Don Metter. I've got a motion.
All right, you have the floor, Mr. Mayor.
I have three, actually. Here's the first one. I move to authorize the general manager, CEO, to negotiate and execute a final settlement agreement with the parties in the Sconard versus GBRA 25th District Court of Guadalupe County.
All right, do we have a motion on the floor? Do I have a second?
This is Director Matthews. I second that.
Thank you, Director Matthews. Is there any discussion?
I'm not seeing that anyone has a question or comment this time, Mr. Chairman. This is Kevin. I would like to publicly acknowledge a few folks who have spent hours and hours on this issue over this past year, who have helped us to get to this point, primarily in-house Daryl Nichols, Jonathan Stinson, and Tom, and then the folks who we've been working with on Lake McQueeney and Placid, Bob Worth, Lindsey Gillum, and Kevin Sconard. Like I said, it's been hours and hours of discussions, brainstorming, negotiating, trying to figure this out. But they have always taken the approach of trying to figure out a path forward as opposed to conflict. And I really appreciate their time and effort in getting us to this point.
Thank you for those comments, Kevin. I want to echo those also. I think it is amazing what can be accomplished when people that have the best possible issues for the lakes to be able to move forward and come up with an agreement. I do appreciate your efforts and the efforts of the people and the council associated with the Sconard case. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Mr. Bowl.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tom, and I will call the names of the directors and ask that you all state your vote. Director Hermes.
Aye.
Director Fogel.
Aye.
Director Matthews.
Aye.
Director Modal. Director Metter.
Aye.
Director Carbonara.
Aye.
Director Ehrig.
Aye.
Director Modal.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Aye.
Thank you. Chairman Patillo.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 8 votes in favor and none opposed on the motion.
Motion passes. Mr. Metter, would you move on to number 2?
I move to authorize the general manager, CEO, to negotiate and execute a final financing and operating agreement with the Lake McQueeney Water Control and Improvement District as anticipated in the Sconard versus GBRA settlement agreement.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
It's Oscar.
Director Ehrig, second.
Any discussion?
No comments or questions at this time?
All right, I'll call for the question. Mr. Bowl.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tom. Director Hermes,
Aye.
Director Fogel,
Aye.
Director Matthews,
Aye.
Director Modal,
Aye.
Director Metter,
Aye.
Director Carbonara,
Aye.
Director Eric,
Aye.
Chairman Patillo.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 8 votes in favor and none opposed.
Motion carries. Mr. Metter, would you please move to number 3?
I move to authorize the general manager, CEO, to negotiate and execute a final financing and operating agreement with the Lake Placid Water Control and Improvement District as anticipated in the Sconard versus GBRA settlement agreement.
I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
It's Oscar. I'll second.
Any discussion?
None at this time.
I'll call the question. Mr. Bowl.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tom. Director Hermes,
Aye.
Director Fogel,
Aye.
Director Matthews,
Aye.
Director Modal,
Aye.
Director Metter,
Aye.
Director Carbonara.
Aye.
Director Eric,
Aye.
Chairman Patillo.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 8 votes in favor and none opposed.
Motion carries. Do we have any other business before the board?
No, sir, we do not.
I will adjourn this meeting at 1:16. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis.